It's the Cracky Rugby podcast. It's the midweek edition prior to the visit of the Bulls for Connacht's first home game of the new WRC season. On today's call, I've got Galway Bay Rugby correspondent William Davies.
Afternoon, Alan.
And our South African correspondent and friend of the podcast, Morgan Piek.
Hi, Alan. Thank you.
Right, as we're doing things slightly differently this week, due to the fact we're recording this the day before our press conference when we normally record, we're just going to go straight into the South African view of what's happening in the URC. At the weekend, Morgan, the South African teams didn't do as well as they might have hoped. How is it being viewed down there?
Difficult way of explaining, but I had this little bit of pleasure when I saw it was unfolding over the weekend with the South African teams underestimating European opponents. That was my view. Albert van der Berg kind of did back it up a little bit earlier this morning, saying maybe they were a little bit complacent going into the north, because there's been that age-old debate about which is better, Southern Hemisphere or Northern Hemisphere rugby. And the consensus was that the two are a lot closer to each other than what a lot of South Africans and South African rugby supporters thought may be the case. I hope it serves as a good wake-up call, and that is pretty much the chat that has been going on around, is that it was rude awakening, tough baptism of fire. And I think luckily for the South African franchises is that the Springboks lost to the All Blacks on Saturday, and I'll use the word lost rather than the All Blacks beating the Springboks, because they did chuck that game away in the last 10 minutes. And that's what the debate's been about for the most of the day.
Yeah, it strikes me, Morgan, that the Cheetahs and the Kings, I always felt struggled to get a lot of recognition in South Africa. They were playing in this slightly alien competition. And now that you've got maybe the four bigger franchises involved, do you think there'll be a better buy-in from the media and fans in South Africa for this, or is it going to be a hard sell?
There's definitely a much better buy-in. A lot of my colleagues from across the country didn't give the Pro 14 any time, any day or time of the day. And they, some people did use the word second tier, and, but when you listen to the guys like Rassie Erasmus, Jock Norbert, they always kept emphasizing that these are test match rugby players. These are the guys that you're going to be playing against Lions Tour. These are the guys that will be coming to South Africa. And I think after this weekend, the South African rugby public has woken up to that. We've got to accept the fact that rugby has become so professional and it's so global that the rugby in Ireland is just as good as rugby in South Africa. The rugby in South Africa is just as good as rugby in England. Wales just as good as in New Zealand. And we've got to accept that fact and actually embrace it. And I think that's one step in actually, because it just seems like there's a big division in rugby at the moment. And, changing rules every 5 seconds doesn't help to unify the sport. And, if we accept the fact that rugby is truly becoming the global sport that we want it to be, and we can know if we go to Ireland for a test series, we can have one hell of a tough test series. And not just like in the old days when you knew Ireland's coming here, there's 2 easy victories coming our way.
I think one of the keys is, it's a heavily analysed game. And I suspect, the Bulls who are coming to Connacht now on Friday night, they came up against a very good Leinster side who sort of owned them from minute one. And I expect there'll be a bigger threat on Friday night here because they'll have a game under their belt. But what did strike me watching a number of the South African teams was their fitness levels don't seem maybe what they need to be to play the sort of speed of rugby they're going to have to play up here. And I'm also wondering that when you take the Springboks out of these 4 sides, are they lacking a little bit of depth? Because so many of the next tier of South African players are either in Europe or somewhere in Japan. They've already been taken out of the system in South Africa.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of depth. we just see it now with these the big four that have gone up north. They've been borrowing players left, right, and centre. There's a whole host of Cheetahs players that have joined the Stormers, Ruan Pino at the Sharks, Tian Meyer at the Sharks. There's a couple of guys linked to the Bulls. One of the new guys that's meant to be arriving at the Cheetahs in November was linked to the Lions. So, it doesn't make a lot of sense kicking one team out of pro rugby and then you start loaning their players and saying, okay, but here's how we're going to do it. I loaned Ruan Pino and Tian Meyer up until December, wait for our Springboks to get back from the end of year tour to Europe, and then you can have them back, but you can have the next generation who aren't getting game time, they can come play for you guys and you don't have to contract. So it's everything, I don't know, everything's like a catch-22 situation.
And you still have the issue then with players signing for Northern Hemisphere teams, like the Dwayne Vermeulen signing seemed to come out of nowhere. And it was like, wow, what a signing for Ulster. But hang on a minute, he's going to play with the Bulls. They were, going to be playing in the URC. I thought that was part of the problem, that playing in the URC was going to stop this player drain, but it doesn't seem to have stopped it yet.
Yeah, it actually, to me, I'm getting the feeling that it's kind of encouraging the guys to go overseas. You look at the Shane Bolton that you guys contracted. I believe he's actually debuted for you guys. Mm-hmm. And I had high hopes of this kid here at the Free State. He just broke into the Free State squad, played an invitational game against the Cheetahs, scored a cracking try against them. And the next thing is like, no, I'm on my way to Galway. So, yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult and very frustrating. But then again, if the kid's good enough and he's got the talent and he's going to get used there, I'll be the first to say, listen, get on that plane and get out as soon as possible and go and make your career there.
Are the Bulls going to look at the fact that they played the best team in the competition last week and now they're going to play Connacht, that they'll feel that, third time lucky. They lost in their first game against Benetton when they probably underestimated them. They lost against the best team in the competition in Leinster last week, but it'll be third time lucky and they'll get a win this week. Is that the view down there?
That is kind of what worries me. Just going through the post-match stuff with Jake White, he kept emphasising that Leinster are the best team. It's the Crusaders of the North. It's a team to beat. And I agree 100%. It is a team to beat, but I suppose I did feel they are going to go up there and they're going to get, or they're not going to taste a victory, but I didn't expect them to get hammered. And it's probably the way in which they lost to Leinster, which is a little bit more worrying. Yes, the Bulls didn't have Springboks there. They can't use Dwayne Vermeulen as an excuse because he's officially signed by Ulster. But I think that William touched on fitness now, so maybe the fitness is not where it was. I remember the Bulls this weekend was the first time, apart from the guys that played international rugby, that they've played opponents from outside South Africa, barring a game between the Bulls and Benetton. Benetton game, I promise you, they underestimated Italian rugby. I think they were a little bit undercooked for this game against Leinster as well, but I think they would have learned. But it's just that there's a rhetoric going on that Leinster's the best, and if you beat Leinster, you win a competition. And I think if you want to take that attitude, you're going to make a hell of a big mistake. Connacht in Galway is not an easy team. Ask any Cheetahs player. It's not an easy team. I'm not going to mention who they were, but there was a coach and a captain of one of the franchises. When I asked them about adapting to the referees overseas, they laughed at me in a press conference. So the guys must forget about playing in the South, start respecting the opponents up North. They want to compete against the likes of Toulon and Toulouse and these kind of teams. But you have to start respecting your opponents.
How successful does this have to be in the first season? Is the URC being sold in South Africa, or is it sort of, I asked you previously, is it a hard sell? Is it a hard sell, do you think?
I don't think it is at all. It's because, remember, in South Africa, since March last year, or let's say since August last year when we started playing, we've only had derbies, left, right and centre. That's all we've had. But it has been easy to sell, I think, and SuperSport has really come on board. And I don't know if you guys remember that during the Pro 14, I still said, it's a bit disappointing not to see talk shows about these games, or, little chat panels leading into the game, halftime and afterwards, but this is happening now, which is a good thing. So, they've made it easy for everybody to kind of understand what's going on, and they started selling a product to the supporters. But the big thing that needs to happen in South Africa is we need to start getting our stadiums open. We don't have that yet. So we need to start getting the fans in, but it's also up to the fans to start doing a responsible thing and stop thinking about themselves and start thinking about people around them as well. So the minute it opens, it's going to become, I think it's going to be insane once you've got Loftus-Versfeld to capacity, or Ellis Park, or Kings Park for that matter, and you've got the Sharks playing against Munster in Durban or Joburg, and the Bulls hosting Connacht or whoever at Loftus-Versfeld. I think that the tourists are really going to experience what South African rugby is like to a level that none of these guys have experienced since 2009, when the British and Irish Lions previously played in South Africa. So I do feel that when sport starts opening up, because we've been starved of it for so long, I think we're going to start getting more bums and seats. But I think people are going to be so starved of sport that at least for the first month or so, I hope we'll start seeing an upward curve, and I think we're going to see really good crowds when sport opens. Hopefully January, touch wood.
That's great to finish on a positive note. Morgan, we'll be back in touch with you again soon. We'll let a few of these games go by, but we'll be looking maybe at the end of the 5 rounds of matches. So we'll get your view when everybody's played 5 games. But thank you for joining us. We'll talk again very soon.
You're listening to the midweek podcast on Craggy Rugby, and from October this is going to be an exclusive show for those on patreon.com/Craggy Rugby who are signed up to our club membership. Find out more by logging on to patreon.com/Craggy Rugby to how to get involved and make sure that you don't miss a show. But in the meantime, stay listening.
Okay, that's great stuff there from Morgan, and as William said, we'll get to chat to Morgan later in the season when we get our first break in the URC season in November. Okay, so William, who was at the press conference and what did they have to say?
Let's have a listen. It's player was Tom Daly, and the coach was now head coach. He's now. I'll try that again. 3, 2, 1. The player was Tom Daly, and the coach was Pete Wilkins, who's now the attack coach and is also described as the senior coach.
Coming into this week now, playing against the South African, a big side, I suppose, even more so we'll be focusing on that fast rugby, try to move that pack around. And we saw against Leinster, I know the scoreline was a bit one-sided in the end, but they did cause Leinster some trouble, and they're definitely big physical men, and their back row in particular will cause trouble. So I think this is like the perfect game for us to show hopefully that new game plan and play a fast brand of rugby and play on top of them and just play at a quicker pace than hopefully they're ever used to. So that's probably the plan going into this week.
You'll have a load of very noisy spectators behind you, which should be, it's the first competitive game with a decent number of people in there. That might be a bit of a help.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, really looking forward to that. Even playing last week, I know we were away to Cardiff and they had a bigger crowd than I've ever played in front of over in the Arms Park. And you can just see what sort of effect it has on the game, and I don't know, some decisions, and they get behind when they do something well and the crowd gets behind them. It's definitely a lift. So we're looking forward to having a few thousand Connacht fans back in the stadium this weekend, and it'll definitely give us the lift that we need. So really looking forward to that, and should be good to get as many as we can in the Sportsground. Yeah.
And help the referee make the right decision, which is the Cardiff fans were pretty volatile. Finally, just to look at the Bulls, I know they're big, and you can focus on that completely, but you'll have looked at them. They must have some slightly different skill sets to that as well. I mean, they're pretty decent side when they're flying.
Oh, definitely, yeah. You just look at, obviously we know all about Marcel Coetzee from his time at Ulster, and especially Goosen at 10, he looked very dangerous on the weekend against Leinster. And then even looking back through the Curry Cup, his kicking game is really strong. He'll kick the ball a mile. So then again, discipline has to be on point, because any penalties within 50 or 60 metres, he's going to have a go at them. And there's always going to be a wind at the Sportsground. So if that's behind his back, I'm sure he'll fancy himself from distance. So their back three as well, really dangerous. Springboks littered throughout the team. So listen, of course they're big men and they're strong, but they're well able to play rugby and well able to offload and play a wide game. So they have threats all over the park, and I don't want to stereotype them into saying they're just big, massive ball carriers in maul and scrum, but they're well able to play rugby as well with some really good halfbacks directing the play. So it's definitely a formidable challenge, but one we're looking forward to here.
Interesting night in Cardiff. How high were the frustration levels for you after that?
Look, mixed. I mean, very frustrated in the sense that we felt it was a game that we could and should win. We'd framed the whole week around the fact that we knew it was going to be a close encounter, probably a one-score game. We needed to be within one score with 10 minutes to go. Equally, we felt that if they were within one score of us with 10 minutes to go, they'd keep coming. So there's a really clear understanding from players and staff that was the challenge that was ahead, and we tried to embrace that from Monday onwards and framed a lot of our messaging and training around that. So part of the frustration, I suppose, for us is that we felt we did a pretty good job over the course of the game, pretty much up to that 67th, 68th minute. We did a pretty good job of staying in the fight. The game wasn't without error. There are obviously improvements within those first 68 minutes, but we felt like we got ourselves into that position where, you know, for the lack of possession that we had in relation to them, we were still within one score, and you know, we were 15 against 14, then 14 against 14. It was very much a fight that we were still in. So the frustration comes not so much from our application in terms of getting into that encounter, but our ability to stay in it in that last 12 minutes. That was where we felt obviously there's a big turning point when you go from losing that 5 metre line out to Jack's unfortunate red card with that breakdown, then into the quick throw and the counter attack and Matt Hansen's yellow. So just that trail of back-to-back negatives, you know, did for us in terms of our ability to stay in the fight. So the frustrations around that rather than around attitude or effort. And there was certainly some good play within that in attack and defence as well. So yeah, it's a mixed feeling, frustration, but enough good to, I suppose, energise us for this week and the new challenge ahead.
Yeah, talk to me. What are you expecting from the Bulls? I mean, the common line is they're a big side, but they must bring a bit more than that. But they were comprehensively beaten by Leinster. So they might be really smarting from that.
I think they'll certainly be smarting from it. I mean, the Bulls team that we saw in the Currie Cup, we obviously watched a large amount of content from that to have a good look at them. And, you know, I thought the performance they put in against Leinster was higher energy and it was highly skilled in parts. They've got some very good players. They've got some established internationals, others obviously that are away, but certainly enough quality there that they're a real threat. It's easy to frame them as a momentum team. They want to put you on the back foot at the set piece, whether that's through scrum or maul, whether it's on the second phase of bringing big runners around the corner or big runners back against the grain. There's an enormous physical threat there. But I also think it's too simple just to say they're purely a momentum team. And if you front up physically, you get the job done. So I think there is a bit of nuance there in terms of how we need to play in attack and defence to respect the threats they've got. Obviously, their kicking game, as well as that set piece we mentioned, is a really key access point for them to get in the game. Something we'll have to be pretty clinical with in terms of dealing with that, the contestable kicks as well as the long ones. So with the physical threat, the kicking threat, then, you know, they've certainly got some talent in that back line if they do get themselves on the front foot. So there's a balance in there of making sure we front up to stop them getting on that front foot, stop them getting that momentum roll on. But at the same time, making sure that we're aware we need to do a bit more than that. It's not just simply, as I said, fronting up physically and thinking that's the job taken care of.
And of course, you can get the full audio of the press conference on patreon.com/CraggyRugby. Remember to join our new tiering system where we've got our club members and executive club members. Have a look at patreon.com/CraggyRugby for more details on that. So they were pretty disappointed, still disappointed at losing out on that game, William. And it's not surprising because they seem to have the game more or less by the scruff of their neck and let it go.
Yeah, look, it's something Connacht have struggled with for a couple of seasons where they get into these situations. They talked about the fact that it would be a one-score game before the game. And it was. And in the 67th minute, they were 5 points down. It was a one-score game. Cardiff were down to 14. Connacht had a 5 metre line out. And they got it wrong. And the game after that became a disjointed mess. They had two players carded very quickly. and it got away from them. Their discipline went, they lost their shape, and Cardiff cruised out to a comfortable win.
Yeah, and looking at one of the stats that sort of threw me before the game, and I think it had an impact in the game, is that their pack was something like 57 to 58 kilos heavier, and importantly, their back row were 34 kilos. So each of our back row were given about 10 kilos a man heavier, and that lack of a ball carrier, they were able to get over the gain line that much easier, and that obviously wore us down as the game went on. It's something that's going to have to be rectified at the weekend.
Yeah, I think so. I think Leva Fafita is back from his hand injury and is training fully. Suggestion is he will play a part. I don't know whether he'll start. Abraham Papali'i as well. I thought it was very obvious on Friday night that Connacht couldn't make easy yards. Cardiff didn't make easy yards either, but they made their yards easier. And Connacht were having to play a very, very almost high-risk strategy at times to get the ball moving. And I'm not sure that the skill set is fully there yet for that. And that's why it broke down. And it was very much a beginning of season game. But at the end of the season, if you're a few points off where you need to be, you will look back at that game. You'll probably look back at other games, but that one will stand out. And the fact that Dai Young, after the game, basically said he felt that Cardiff were in real trouble. Nick Williams, who was commentating for BBC Wales behind me, said exactly the same thing. He felt that Connacht had taken control of the game. But it's gone now. They've got to move on. But it's one game. There's 17 games left. That's what it boils down to. There's less games this season. That's why I think, if it was a 20, I know last season was stopped at 16, but if it was a 21-game season, an 18-game season, and you've lost your first game. So therefore now you have 17 games left. And that's the only way you can look at it. And the Bulls are going to be an interesting threat on Friday night.
They certainly are, and let's hope Tom Farrell, who only had 9 touches in the whole game, our most penetrative back, I suppose, from the point of view he gets people out of trouble more often than not. We just didn't seem to give him enough ball. Let's hope he gets more ball, and he's only just back from injury. And talking of injuries, what's the injury update this week? Is it hopefully a lot better than last week's?
Okay, Caelan Blade, who had an Achilles problem, and Leva Fafita with a finger injury have both returned to team training this week. And it's suggested that they are available for selection. Colm Riley with an ankle injury will be out of action until early November, which is effectively for URC the end of November. But of course, there might be some games during the 4-week lull that's there at Eagles level. Bundyaki neck, Sam Elo foot, Sean Masterson Achilles, Peter Robb back, and Alex Wooten calf are all nearing a return to training over the next 2 to 3 weeks, which suggests they might be available for selection towards the end of this run of games. The 2 long-term injuries, Dennis Buckley knee and Gavin Thornbury's shoulder, are continuing their rehabilitation, which I'm sure is a very tough slog for them, but they're both hard at it. But you're looking probably towards or after Christmas before there's any more concrete developments on those.
And of course, it wasn't just a Connacht game that was a disappointing result at the weekend. Seeing the women lose to the last kick of the game against Scotland, which knocks them out of even the repechage for the next World Cup, was a massive disappointment, a massive blow to women's rugby. I think it's been pretty well covered right across the media in all sorts of places, so we won't dwell on it here. But we will talk about this at some point in the future, and hopefully we get Ali Miller back on to talk about what's happened with women's rugby and what needs to be done to improve it so that we don't have a situation where Ireland have not qualified for a World Cup, because it's so important for the women's game. As I say, we'll talk about that at a later stage. Looking ahead to the Bulls, these are a brand new team for Connacht, coming from the Southern Hemisphere. They had a bit of a defeat there at the weekend, following on from their defeat at the end of last season. I'm not sure they're going to take us as lightly as we might have hoped had they had a better performance at the weekend, but I think they're going to cause us a lot of trouble. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think potentially, look, they must be smarting after that performance. But Morgan has just said to us there it's the fact that losing to Leinster, they're saying, well, Leinster are the best team in Europe, which is not really 100% true. They're a very good side, but there are sides in England and France that are equally as good. But I think they'll have to up their game. They did look a bit ponderous. They didn't look fit at the end of the game. Similarly, what happened to them against Benetton in the Rainbow Cup. But Connacht have got to be really on their game here. They've got to get this right. They cannot. If you go 0-2 out of your first 5 games, you're starting on the back foot then, and you're chasing. And whenever we think about the way these fixtures are laid out or the structure of the season, every game now has a price on its head in terms of winning. I think Connacht will try to play the fast tempo game to move them around a bit. They're a big pack, but they're a bit more than that. But realistically, Leinster were comfortable winners and did show that they are the best team in the URC. There's no question about that. They are that. They have the players, they have the squad depth, and Connacht just have to get their game away on Friday night. And let's listen to what Arno Botha, ex-Ulster and Munster player who's now with the Bulls, had to say.
Yeah, they say it's like Kimberley but totally different. So it's gonna be obviously they're gonna be up for it. It's gonna be a tough game, you know. It's not gonna be dry and hot. It's gonna be cold and wet, you know. So that's what they can bring. Also, they do bring a physical battle, and one thing about them, they never stop. So that's the other thing, and that's one thing I experienced with them. I've played with 3 of the guys played with 3 of the guys that are going to play in a Connacht team. And the whole mindset is just they're not going to stop. Doesn't matter what, they're going to go. And I mean, they beat Munster there, so that's also something that we need to know, and I think we do, and do our prep on that. So it's definitely it's going to be a nice physical battle, you know, and an interesting battle. It's going to be totally different than Saturday, because I think it's going to rain. And it's going to be a wet game, so it's something that we're going to experience. But this time, I think we're just need to be a bit more clinical, whatever we do and when we do it in the game.
Yeah, because this Bulls team is effectively their Currie Cup winning side, and the only change from the team that won the Currie Cup was Bismarck du Plessis, who's joined them at this stage, because Wayne Verbulen, who's leaving, as we talked about, wasn't there for their Currie Cup win. So you're looking at this is effectively a Currie Cup side, and it's really interesting to see how they're going to get on against what we would be deemed as the next step down from Leinster, because, you know, whether we like it or not, Leinster have been running away with this competition for a number of years. So it's going to be really fascinating. But yeah, there's some interesting players that we're going to come across, and Arno Botha is certainly one of them. He knows all about Connacht.
Yeah, he's brought up the usual stuff there, but he might be right on Friday. It might be windy and rainy. There are players going to be around these teams. There's a lot of players from the Cheetahs who've played a lot of rugby in the Pro 14. That they have been spread out through the 4 teams, so they are going to come with some knowledge. Bismarck du Plessis is an interesting one. He played here against South Africa when South Africa played Connacht in 2007. And got himself into a little bit of bother, and was essentially, rather than being carded either red or yellow, the referees suggested that maybe he could be substituted because it would have affected his World Cup. And that was, of course, the World Cup that South Africa went on to win. He was a much younger man then. He's an elder statesman now. But I think of course, we have come across him when he played against us for Montpellier a couple of years ago too. I think it was my last away trip for any Connacht game was that Montpellier game, and Bismarck was playing in that game, so we know a little bit about him. Yeah, we do, and I think this I'm looking forward to this game, but I think it's going to be a tough one, and yeah. I think they are going. They don't want to lose 3 games on the trot. I know that the game was in the Rainbow Cup was in June, but the media in South Africa will be starting to climb into them a little bit if they lose to a side that they feel are, as you say, a step below Leinster. Connacht need to be at it, and I hope, and I'm concerned sometimes that this new version of Connacht don't appreciate how to use the conditions at the Sportsground. It's the 16th man is the fans. There'll be 3,000 of them in there on Friday night. I hope they're making a racket because the Cardiff fans certainly made a racket on last Friday. But the 17th man at the Sportsground is often the weather. But sometimes I feel we don't use it. We don't actually put it into play. If there's a gale blowing or there's a wind blowing, put the ball up, test them a bit, make them realize that this is not like playing on a nice, soft, artificial surface where you don't have to deal with that. And just the general conditions, I'd like to see them used a bit more. If you're asking me to call it, I think Connacht will win, but I think it'll be very, very difficult. And I think they'll win because they're just maybe that little bit more cohesive than this side. But
plus the fact that I don't think the Bulls will ever played in anything quite like the Sportsground. Like Arno Botha and Marcel Costia would have seen it and have been here before and know what it's like, but it's still not the same coming to the Sportsground. And it looks, at the moment, the forecast is for wet and windy weather. So it's going to be a traditional Sportsground welcome for these guys, and coming from the High Veld, which I believe there in Pretoria is on the High Veld, isn't it?
It is very much in the High Veld. I'll tell you, I was there in midwinter for the Lions Test in 2009. It would have passed for a summer's day here. Cold at night, clear blue skies, damn all oxygen if you run up a couple of flights of stairs. I'm not the fittest person in the world, but it's a bit of a shock to your system when you do that. But I just expect them to be better having played Leinster. I think they will be digging in, and they're a bit of a wounded bull now, and that could be quite dangerous.
It certainly could. Okay, I think we've covered all the angles there for today, and thanks again to Morgan for joining us. And we'll be here during the week, Thursday, because it's a Friday game. We'll be chatting to the coach on Thursday, so we'll have our next outing on Thursday. And don't forget to sign up on Patreon, because this is the last midweek podcast that will be given out free from now on. You'll have to go to patreon.com/CraggyRugby and join our club. So hopefully you'll do that. Now here's William with the results from last weekend and the fixtures for the coming weekend in the United Rugby Championship.
Friday the 24th of September, Zebre 26, Lions 38, Cardiff Rugby 33, Connacht 21, Ulster 35, Glasgow 29. On Saturday the 25th of September, Benetton 22, Stormers 18, Edinburgh 26, Scarlets 22, Leinster 31, Bulls 3, Munster 42, Sharks 17. On Sunday the 26th of September, Dragons 23, Ospreys 27. It's the first round, so we won't bother with tables yet. Let's look ahead now to the fixtures for round 2. On Friday the 1st of October, Connacht versus the Bulls. That's a 7:35 p.m. kickoff Irish time, and the Scarlets play the Lions at the same time. On Saturday the 2nd of October, Benetton versus Edinburgh at 1 p.m, Glasgow versus the Sharks at 3 p.m, Zebre versus Ulster at 5:15 p.m. Irish time, and Munster versus the Stormers and Ospreys versus Cardiff. They both kick off at 7:35 p.m. And on Sunday the 3rd of October, Dragons versus Leinster with a 2 p.m. kickoff.
Loose, cut it loose. Break out or nothing changes. Side